Well, welcome back. Sri Lanka's prime minister has taken on the role of interim president as the country looks for new leadership during an economic collapse. Well, there were celebrations on the streets after he resigned. He left Sri Lanka for Singapore when protesters stormed his residence earlier this week. Parliament will sit tomorrow, and a new leader could be chosen within a week. Sri Lanka's economy collapsed under the weight of crushing debt and runaway inflation.
And for more on how the GTA is reacting to all of this news, we are joined now by Gary Anandasangari, the Liberal Member of Parliament for Scarborough Rouge Park. Gary, first off, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. You know, putting this all into perspective, can you just kind of briefly get the larger community caught up on this?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Bakari and Jamie, for this invitation. Look, the GTA is home to over 200,000 Tamil Canadians, many of them who identify themselves as originating from Sri Lanka. Obviously, many came as refugees. So the perspective that many have towards what's happening on the island is somewhat complicated. First and foremost, most Tamils feel that the protest right now that we see because of the economic crisis wasn't there. That solidarity wasn't there when tens and thousands of Tamils were slaughtered, by the previous president Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his brother Mahinda Rajapaksa. So in some ways, people are calling me and saying, well, it's great that the South is rising towards economic challenges, but where were they when we had so many thousands of Tamils who were displaced and who were struggling. And the conversation today really ought to be about the failed state of Sri Lanka, not just its leadership. It's, the last two leaders that we're talking about, are two of many over the last 70 odd years who have brought this country to its knees. And in part it's because they have not address the underlying causes of the conflict, the instability, which really demands self-determination for Tamils in the north and east, as well as protection of other minorities, such as the Muslim community. So I think in many respects, today's a day to reflect. All those who can connect to the island need to understand that it is not about the Sri Lankan flag. This is about ultimately saying that all those on the island have a right to self-determination, have a right to live in peace and equality and dignity. Their languages, for example, Tamil, to be protected, control over, local natural resources and so on. So I think it's in fact, in many ways, an opportunity for a reset on Sri Lanka and for the conversation to evolve from, the failed, consecutively failed governments to say, how do we restructure the state in a way that will ensure long-term viability of the island?
Gary, the images that are coming out of Sri Lanka speaks volumes. I mean, just the sights of hundreds of thousands of people going through the streets, protesting, the taking over of government buildings and homes and palaces. What goes through your mind when you're seeing these pictures play out on the news?
Jamie, look, this is moving, right? What's happening right now is moving. There is a citizens' protest that is very profound, and we've seen it over the last number of weeks. But I'll tell you, there are, hundreds of mothers of the disappeared who have been protesting for over 2,000 days, over 5.5 years. Many of them have been asking for answers to their loved ones. Nobody's covered that, right? That's what's moved me, because when I visited the island in 2018, I saw firsthand what people were going through, and sadly, we have not covered that as a story. And I think as much as we see the reaction to the economic conditions from the South, from many who are really responsible for an incredible presence and show of force, which has led to the resignation of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, it's still fails to address what many in the north and east, particularly the Tamil community, has been asking for many years, which is accountability, right? So someone like Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his brother Mahinda Rajapaksa are accused of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. We do not want them to go home. What we want them to do is go to The Hague. We want them to be tried under international criminal law, and we want countries such as Canada to make sure that they are held to account for the crimes that they've committed. finally, I think I'm in many ways glad that the Southern leadership and many in the civil society accept that these are failed leaders. But ultimately, if we do not hold these two to account, what we risk is recurring of another regime that will continuously oppress the rights of minorities and of course the Tamils. And I think that is what needs to be reflected today. As much as these protests are in many ways inspiring, it is also clouded by the fact that all of them many are holding national symbols of oppression for the Tamil people, and I feel very conflicted in that sense, because while protests are important and I think it shows a sense of solidarity, it is the solidarity of the South, and what we're looking for is to make sure that national questions such as that involving the Tamils are resolved.
And with that, Gary, we have time for one quick last question. What, if any, conversation has been had with Trudeau regarding the accountability that you just mentioned?
Well, look, our government's very much engaged on this issue, on the issue of accountability. The House of Commons passed a unanimous consent motion on May 18th, acknowledging the genocide of Tamils on the island. And of course, the Prime Minister, as well as Minister Jolie, I've spoken to directly on this, as well as the team. And we're very much monitoring what's happening. I think that the next step for us is to ensure that both Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa are held to account. They are tried under international humanitarian and international law, and make sure that they act as a deterrent. We are now in a world where we are talking about a rules-based international order. We see what dictators like Putin have been doing to their people, but it is not. It doesn't happen by accident. It happened because people like Mahinda and Gotabaya have done this to their own people, 13 years ago, and we need to be consistent. So I'm calling on both of these brothers to be tried by the International Criminal Court, but also jurisdiction under universal jurisdiction in countries like Singapore. And I'm quite disappointed that Singapore has invited or accepted Gotabaya Rajapaksa and given them safety. He should be tried. He should be charged and tried. And I think if he tries to flee Singapore, then Interpol should be arresting him and keeping track of where they're going and ensuring that they're held to account.
Gary Ananda Sangari, Liberal Member of Parliament for Scarborough Rouge Park. Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.